You go to the cardiologist and they know that specialty. And of course, doctors have a wealth of information, but there's so much information and research now just in one specialty, even more so than ever before. And that's only going to continue to grow, that it's so important that we take the blinders off and not just see what we know, but really work with a network.
The big question is this: how do we take a seemingly ordinary world and make it beyond extraordinary? In yoga, there is so much more than meets the eye, and it's not just the things we do on our yoga mats that make the biggest difference. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Austin Bitsis, and welcome to Life as a Secret Yogi. Today's guest is Tiffany Cruikshank, and welcome to the show, Tiffany, and the Life as a Secret Yogi podcast, as we hear your life as a secret yogi and how you've helped thousands, if not millions of others find their own secret yogis. So I'm grateful to have you on the show today, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome opportunity to have you and speak about these topics and about yoga medicine with yourself. And for all who don't know Tiffany, she is an international yoga teacher, an author, a health and wellness expert, and she is the founder of Yoga Medicine. She is also the author of Optimal Health for a Vibrant Life, which is this 30-day guide to optimize your health with nutrition, herbs, myofascial release, yoga, and really simple home remedies. She's also the author of Meditate Your Weight, which we're definitely going to talk more about today. And she has released over 150 classes on yogaglow.com. And Tiffany is known as this teacher's teacher and has written for and been on the cover of many prominent publications. Some of those publications being the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, Forbes, Yoga Journal, Prevention, Dr. Oz, Self Women's Health, and many, many more. And Tiffany has been really teaching yoga for many years now and leading teacher trainings for many years now as well. She has a pre-med bachelor's degree in medical plant biology and a master's in acupuncture and oriental medicine with a specialty in sports medicine and orthopedics. Tiffany's strengths lie in her ability to fuse the two worlds of Eastern and Western medicine together and apply it to the practice of yoga in an accessible and relevant way, which is what we are going to talk about today. But before we dive in, a little bit about today's audience and the Life as a Secret Yogi show. So our audience are those that want to take the practice of yoga, meditation, breath work, energy work, animal-assisted therapy, among other related practices into the real world. It's a lot of people who are looking to perform at a higher level in other disciplines, may it be running, golf, surfing, weightlifting, freediving, basketball, art, entrepreneurship, or simply daily life. And those who just want to make life beautiful. And the audience does not necessarily have the desire to become the stereotypical yogi or yoga teacher. Nevertheless, the audience would like to utilize these tools of yoga, meditation, and related practices to make life beautiful. So in short, this message of the secret yogi is that we all have this heroic self. It's our inner source that we cultivate through these tools, yoga, meditation, and similar practices to make our seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. It's that we all have this superhero that lives within, and these tools allow us to tap into our quote, quote, superpowers. Those superpowers being mindfulness, awareness, love, focus, and creating happiness from within. To just list a few, but ultimately just feel good in a body that we love. So we really hope this episode helps you unlock your own superpowers and embody your own secret yogi. And if you like it, consider sharing it with at least one person that needs it most. And also consider leaving a written review and rating wherever you're listening to. So Tiffany, welcome to the show. And I'd love to just start off with your story to finding yoga and then eventually leading to how you got started and founded Yoga Medicine.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was funny because as you were as you said, pet therapy, my dog started scratching and vibrating the table. She sits on my desk here.
Awesome. Yeah, I got my kitty
um,
right here.
she just swatted her paw. Uh, um, Gosh, I found yoga when I was really young. I was 14 years old, and I was actually, I think, just struggling in so many ways, like so many 14-year-olds. Now we have teenagers, one in college now, and it's been interesting to watch it from an outsider's perspective. But for me, I found it in just such a challenging part of my life, and it was kind of like a sense of feeling like I could kind of come home to myself and be comfortable in my skin. I went on a wilderness. My parents sent me on a wilderness program, and I met an herbalist there, and he just opened my eyes to this idea of nature providing all of the tools that we need to be healthy, and it's changed me ever since. It kind of led me down the path that I'm on, and I when I went home, I found an herbalist to apprentice with. I was kind of sick of high school, and it wasn't interesting to me anymore. So I finished and went off to college at 16. And then when I was in college, I really wanted to study ethnobotany and medicinal plant usage and herbal medicine. And that was really tricky to find. I ended up getting my degree in medicinal plant biology, and but just really wanting to go on to the next thing, really wanting to use these tools. When I was 14, I have pictures of it still. I would go out and collect all these plants and make all these potions. I made all my own lotions and shampoos. And this was, early 90s, and all sorts of things. Some were good, some were not as good. And, loved making potions and things for friends. And so I really wanted to get into that study. And when I was in college, I found an acupuncturist that I really connected with. He was a Zen monk, and he practiced at one of the studios that I taught at. And he really turned me on to Chinese medicine and this art of holistic medicine. And that really got me excited about finishing my pre-med and then going on into Chinese medicine. When I went off to college when I was 16, backing up a little, there wasn't a lot of yoga, and there really wasn't any yoga much. There wasn't much where I lived or where I was moving to for college. So I did a program in the summer and started teaching right away, and really loved just being able to help people. And one of the things I think I love most about this practice always is the accessibility, the ability to do it and not need all these fancy, expensive things. I always kind of refer to it as kind of like the owner's manual, of learning your unique owner's manual. And as teachers, we get to kind of guide people on this kind of inner listening path and exploration of their own. There she is. And so for me, it was really this journey, and yoga was such a big part of that journey through holistic medicine. And so then I went on and did my degree in Chinese medicine and did a specialty in sports medicine, orthopedics. And as I was practicing, a lot of my patients at the time were also yoga students, because I was teaching a lot of classes. And then, I think yoga, there's obviously anything can injure you, but I think it also exposes things you might not notice. You might kind of stuff away. It's easy to sit at a desk and ignore the kind of aching pains and things here and there. But with yoga, it also shines a light on them. So anyways, a lot of my patients were yoga students, and I quickly noticed that my patients who were yoga students also seemed to get better a lot quicker. So I started giving what I called yoga prescriptions to my non-yoga patients, which were very simple, like maybe one pranayama practice or one simple pose. It was usually just one or two things that they could do regularly. And as I connected more with other healthcare providers, I had a network of people that I work with. And and I was in Portland at the time when I first started seeing patients. I just felt this need in the healthcare community, not only for the healthcare providers wanting to send people to do these yoga practices, which ultimately made them advocates of their own healthcare as well, proactive members of the experience, which is, I think, really helpful to I guess as a side note, to help prevent burnout in the medical world. It's, a lot of, I think, that burden is feeling like we as healthcare providers have to do everything. So I felt this kind of need for it in the healthcare care provider community. And so I decided it was my mission that I really wanted to provide a resource of teachers who were trained more deeply in both East and West. And I think as a healthcare provider, as an acupuncturist, Chinese medicine provider, that was something that's really important to me. It was always been important to me, as being able to educate people in a meaningful way. Like, I don't need to teach them all about acupuncture, all about yoga, but in a context that's meaningful and makes sense to them, and also motivates them to be compliant with whatever I'm giving them, even if, MDs, maybe that's even just pills, but compliance is important in any kind of healthcare modality. And so I wanted to be able to train teachers to be able to kind of see that there is a place both for Eastern and traditional medicines. One is, a lot of people can relate to, Western and traditional medicines, but I think Western medicine is really important because a lot of us can relate to it. A lot of us understand the body, the anatomy, the physiology. It's a little harder for some people to grasp, some of the traditional practices that we don't really understand just yet. So for me, it was really important to fuse the two together. And that's really kind of what my life's become now, is training yoga teachers to work in healthcare settings or therapeutic settings by really integrating both Eastern and Western concepts, and then providing a resource of teachers for the healthcare systems.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I love this idea. I was just taking a couple notes down of kind of getting like doctors and the healthcare workers that are not traditionally yoga practitioners or don't have maybe a practice of their own, kind of getting them into the practice, because that kind of opens up the door to like them now realizing the importance, and then fusing that into kind of more preventative type practices. And you also mentioned something about like yoga prescriptions, and that's like a cool idea. And we've talked about like using like yoga and meditation and this stuff as kind of like your painkiller on the show before. But like in that concepts, I just think of like somebody handing you a prescription, oh, go get this from CVS or whatnot. And it's like, well, your back hurts. Instead of taking this anti-inflammatory, here's this 2 poses to do that might help. Do it for a week or something. Like, that's a really cool concept. And I think that kind of flips the perspective on it. So,
yeah, and I think it's a tricky one. I've actually stopped using that term a little bit, because I do think it's important as yoga teachers to be clear in our role. And our role is not to be their healthcare provider. Our role is absolutely not to take over their medical care. But, and I think it's so important to remember and really recognize the power of the yoga teacher's role as a supplementary role too, because our job is to help support them through this experience and in so many different ways. And I think we'll talk to that a little bit more, but I think there's such a powerful part of this that allows us to come out of this experience of identifying with a diagnosis and, this pill that I'm going to take and treat with. And so I don't use the yoga prescription term anymore, just because I think it's important to be clear that I'm a yoga teacher, not a doctor. Even we have probably a quarter of our teachers in yoga medicine are healthcare providers, but even those, when I'm seeing yoga students, I have a different liability, a different kind of realm for that. I'm not there to diagnose. I'm not there. It's like it's a different hat I wear. And when I'm seeing patients, when they come to me as a Chinese medicine provider or an acupuncturist, I am diagnosing, I am treating, and I am often using yoga too, but it's such a tricky gray line. But yeah. I agree. I think it's important to think about these tools as a form of medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's other alternatives, and I think that's something important for everyone listening who's not a yoga teacher. I know that's like, well, when we went through our trainings, that's one thing that they say, in terms of like, you're not a medical practitioner, and if somebody comes to you with that type of question, of course that they go to their doctor, or they go and they consult a healthcare practitioner. But it's this teamwork, and this is kind of the next topic that I really wanted to talk about, and I loved it with yoga medicine, is this idea of healthcare as a team, like in terms of working together in teamwork and needing a multifaceted approach. And I guess, like, how does that really work? Maybe we could go through a particular example with like a patient archetype, or somebody that kind of comes to a healthcare provider, or maybe to a teacher that's specialized, that is certified in yoga medicine. Like, how does that teamwork work?
Well, I think first off, backing up, I think there's just so much information these days that there's so many different specialties. No one can know it all. You go to the cardiologist and they know that specialty. And of course, doctors have a wealth of information, but there's so much information and research now just in one specialty, even more so than ever before. And that's only going to continue to grow, that it's so important that we take the blinders off and not just see what we know, but really work with a network. And it's beautiful. You kind of see some of this happening in, integrative centers, or healing centers, or, a lot of some communities have this where they'll have several doctors working together. When I was at Nike, at their headquarters, it was really wonderful because we had a lot of different providers. We didn't have MDs that were on staff there, but we had different MDs for different specialties that would come in for skin screenings or surgical screenings, or we had different rotations that would come in. And then we had a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, we had massage therapists, nutritionists, and then I ran the Chinese medicine department. And it was just wonderful because we could work as a team. We could share notes, and you sign waivers for this and all, that your information is shared within your medical practice. It's all, it's all transparent, but we can now discuss cases together. And it's such an important thing in the medical world to be able to have these round tables where we can discuss, because what ends up happening is I don't get to see everything. I see this, right? When you have a hammer, everything's a nail. And, and it's easy as an acupuncturist to think, or a yoga teacher to think, that I can help with everything. And maybe I can be helpful with a lot of things, but it's really important to be able to, and I think it's also a big part of also preventing healthcare provider burnout too, is that all the weight isn't on my shoulders. Like, I am not fully responsible because I cannot know everything and I cannot do everything. So what I love about yoga within this teamwork is that it guides the student. It helps empower the student to find what's right for them, because the only person who knows you is you. You are the only one ultimately who can feel what's going on in your body, and your doctors and healthcare providers are making decisions based off of that information you're giving them. So if I can increase someone's body awareness or self-awareness, then I'm actually providing more tools and information to the doctors. Of course, the other challenging thing is the system and the insurance and how much time doctors have, of course. And that's the beauty of it. As a yoga teacher, I get to spend a lot of time with this person. I really get to know them. And so the body awareness and self-awareness that we teach as yoga teachers is so foundational. So as a student, it's like, if you get overwhelmed with all the details of the practices, remember, it does come back to, and science and research actually really supports this, new research of the power of simply our body awareness. Things like our enhancing proprioception to mediate pain as a really important intervention for pain. So there's a lot of really important places just for simple body awareness. That doesn't mean I have to interpret it. So even just, within the yoga practices and postures, sensing and noticing, and this is a big part of the yoga practice, is being able to notice without judging, without interpreting. Can I just be in it? And that in of itself is such an important therapeutic modality. So I think yoga teachers within a teamwork scenario is really about empowering them through giving them some of these tools to, again, to shift their experience in their body, but also empowering them to be an advocate for their own healthcare. And, I think one of the hardest things from a healthcare provider's perspective is also that, a lot of times patients think like they're just going to go to this one person and it's all going to be great. And that would be wonderful. But a lot of times, especially with chronic issues, a lot of times it is this peeling away. So I might go to one provider and it can be helpful, but maybe I need something else. And unfortunately, our health and wellness is a little bit more complicated. So sometimes even a yoga teacher's guidance to push them to get a second opinion. I'm never going to tell them their doctor's opinion is wrong or that they shouldn't do it. But I and the surgeon want them to be confident, because it improves outcomes as I go into these therapies, and try different things. And kind of sometimes it's a peeling away of the layers, but really our job, a yoga teacher's job, is to guide and help students really listen to that inner knowing, which is built inside of all of us. And, sometimes we learn to tune it out, but it's such a powerful part of our health and wellness, because ultimately, modern medicine, especially Western medicine, is designed to keep us alive. And that's the reality. And they're freaking brilliant at it. And now everyone wants them to like do nutrition and be preventative and do everything. And it's like, that's a whole lifetime study of its own. So if you want health and wellness, I really think, you know, if you want to optimize your health and wellness and more preventative approach, you've got to dig maybe in a different area or a little deeper, and look at other modalities and look at a three-dimensional approach.
Yeah. No, this is so cool in terms of like, I'm fascinated in this and your perspective being in it. And I'm just like thinking about like, I guess my own experience, maybe as like a college athlete. And in college we had the chiropractor, the nutritionist, we got the physical therapist, we got the coach, and then we got ourselves. And like you said, it's like your inner knowing, you know you best. And like you increase that awareness and you kind of work between all these specialists, and they kind of help not heal you, but help you perform the best that you can in that particular sport. For me, it was running. And it was kind of cool how they all work together and they all talk and they all know each other and we work as a team. And then this talking to you, my question that came to my mind when you were mentioning that is like, where do you see the future of this teamwork approach going? Do you see it getting more collaborative, or are these barriers, like you said, like insurance and stuff like that?
I remember back in the 90s when I started studying Chinese medicine and holistic medicine and started my schooling, you know, it was like a pipe dream of mine to have a holistic center. And things have evolved and I have other things that I'm enjoying doing now, but those things are happening regularly now. And, you know, doctors are wanting that and things are definitely shifting more than I thought they would. I definitely think we're on track for that. And this is why I love sports medicine. People think of sports medicine as a separate thing that's like just for these professional athletes. But the reality is that sports medicine is working with a population who is dedicated 150% of their energy to performing at their peak. Right. And who doesn't want that? I mean, all of us want to feel our best. All of us want to perform our best. That could be in our job or relationships. That could be at a sport or athletic endeavor or a million other things. But we all want to have focus and we all want to have energy and we want to feel good in our bodies. And so for me, sports medicine is everyone. I really love that specialty because it's about really feeling good, which was kind of what led to my first book, which was, you know, Optimal Health, and looking at this from a three-dimensional lens, because that's what you have to do. And I've worked with a lot of professional athletes, and depending on the athlete, you know, a lot of them have a whole entourage that travels with them and works on them. And half of their training oftentimes is that recovery, you know, the massage, the acupuncture, the yoga, the meditation, the mental training, the nutrition, you know, yada, yada, yada. So it's a big part of it. Now, as non-professional athletes, do we need to spend half of every day doing that? No, but we can learn a lot, I think, from looking at athletes and recognizing that there's always things that we can do to support our health and our wellness.
Yeah, no, definitely. I couldn't agree more. And that's cool to hear your perspective on it. Like I said, being in it. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was adapting this traditional yoga to a modern audience. So yoga medicine is about understanding the body from a Western viewpoint, as you mentioned, and fusing that with the richness of the traditional practices of yoga to get a potency that applies to the modern day person in order to support the overwhelmed, overburdened medical systems of this world. So this really correlates what we were just speaking about, and that was a quote from your website. So can we talk more about this, like adapting traditional yoga?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's written so well. It's like I wrote that. Yeah.
Who wrote that? Yeah, and that's I was hoping, you know, what the name implies too. Yoga medicine is this fusion of the two worlds that I think it's so easy for people. It's so easy to get lost in one of them. Of course, as I mentioned before, either one of those, one segment of either one of those is a lifetime study. You know, you could take a specialty in either. But for me, what's really important is being able to layer together what we've learned from science and research and anatomy and physiology with these traditional practices of yoga, which we've been doing for so long and we know are helpful. And layering them together, to me, really specifically to meet the individual, because that to me is what therapeutics are. I think a lot of people think of yoga therapeutics as lying on bolsters and really gentle yoga. But for me, yoga therapeutics is what really suits the individual. And sometimes that's vigorous movement. Sometimes that's vigorous practices. Sometimes that's meditation. There's a million different ways. And it's one of the reasons I love yoga is that there's so many tools in our tool belt. As a teacher, sometimes it's just how I'm cueing people or the pacing of the classes that's really supporting them therapeutically. It might be the poses or the style. We have so many tools. And I love this when I work with new athletes too, because, and there's a lot more information coming about in the sports medicine world. It was a lot of education when I started working with athletes 15 years ago. But, nowadays they usually come in with a pretty decent amount of information, but I think there's still always really astounded by the degree with which yoga teachers can be very therapeutically specific. It's not just like, okay, let's do sun salutes, or we're always going to do this. And I think that's what's really beautiful about it. And as yoga teachers, it's really just trying to find where you can be helpful.
Yeah. And I know yoga was originally meant to be kind of taught on this like one-to-one, like teacher to student individualized approach. And of course, with everything, I mean, just to open up a studio, you have to kind of do this kind of one size fits all approach, and you can't blame them. It's hard to run a studio and a profitable studio. And the same thing with online courses. But I think that the option and the possibility is there, and it can be super individualized. And like you said, like don't underestimate the yoga teacher. And in terms of that, did you have something to say?
Yeah. And I think I totally agree. And I think COVID has taught me also about, and teaching online, the power of being able to provide those. I do think ultimately, if you have an injury or an illness or something really significant or serious that you need to work with, you need to work with someone one-on-one. You need to find a way. I mean, optimally, again, there can be limitations and difficulties for a variety of reasons, but optimally, it's best if you can work one-on-one with someone so they can tailor it. But for people looking for general health and wellness, I really believe that you can get a lot out of the online experience, especially now during COVID. I think what's important to me with that is empowering students and teaching them little bits. And it's not really, definitely not to be a teacher, but I need to learn to be my own best teacher. Because as I said before, I'm the only one who knows me. There's no one else like me out there who responds like me. So if I can instill these tools in my students to help them navigate and listen and figure out what practices they need. And part of that just comes by practicing, right? Like at first you just have to get, like working with athletes. At first I just have to get them familiar with the poses. I can't put in the nuances and therapeutics. It's really just like, let's get familiar. And it's the same thing for anyone who's new to yoga. I just have to get familiar, start to develop a baseline body awareness so that becomes my therapeutic tool. Now that I have some awareness, I can navigate and then go on a site like ours. And actually my new platform, you mentioned Yoga Glow, but my new platform now is Yoga Medicine Online.
Awesome.
And we've got a lot of classes on there. And I shifted over there specifically because I wanted to be able to provide more really therapeutic, targeted. And again, therapeutic doesn't mean gentle always, but there's definitely plenty of those on there. But there's vigorous, there's strength building, there's connective tissue classes on building strength of collagen and fascia and anti-inflammatory practices. We have all sorts of different things because the beauty of doing this online is I really believe you can get what you need in a short period of time. Like you don't have to practice an hour, 2 hours a day, though that would be wonderful. In fact, we base so on Yoga Medicine Online, we have a weekly wellness program each week, and we base it off of the guidelines that the Health and Human Services come up with. Every few years, they spend like 9 months digging into all the new research as far as it relates to preventing chronic disease, and now they've added cancer and brain health, and I think a couple other things. But they come up with their guidelines, and they've got guidelines on aerobic activity and strength and things like that. So we actually developed our weekly wellness in line with that, so people can get a variety of things. They can get some of the strength component and some of the aerobic component and some of the nervous system component, because there's so much more we know to our health in yoga. So we have, restorative practice each week and a meditation, and then some more vigorous, and then some really that give more of a nod to our physiology and our organs, so that, over time, our students who are online learning with us are also learning. They get educational videos too, if they want to watch those. And I really believe as a human being in the importance of investing in your own, and you don't need to be an expert, but learning a little bit about your body and your health and wellness, because I think it's so important to be a proactive part of that cycle. And there's just so much out there nowadays too. So finding what's helpful for you, I think is really important. And I do think it's really cool in this online world now to be able to provide resources like that. And then also as a user, to be able to use resources like that, where I can look at this 3D approach. Because I think a lot of times in yoga, we focus so much on the physical or the stretching or even the strength, or maybe you're really into yin yoga and you get really into the meridians or the fascia. And I think it's so important to come back and see this 3-dimensional view of this person, which is the beauty of being a yoga teacher, is that we get to approach that 3-dimensional view, which I think is one of the most powerful parts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in terms of, yes, one-on-one yoga is great. And if you could do that, amazing. But this online resources is absolutely awesome. And that's how I practice. So I appreciate you putting that out there. And I'm going to definitely check out that as a resource. And because that's how I think of practicing in this practical, tactical approach. And it seems like you have it all in one place, which is super cool, instead of trying to like nitpick in different places to kind of treat what I'm trying to have, like you said, having a proactive part of that cycle and of my own practice. So yeah, it's really cool. And I'll put that in the show notes.
I just, for me, and this is just also my leaning, I'm a very curious person. I love learning. I always have. And, the education is just a small part of it. I spend a lot of my week digging through research, and I think education is such a powerful thing. And I just remember back to when I used to teach more in-person classes. Now I do a lot of teacher trainings, and, those people who would study with me regularly really developed this arsenal of tools, and patients too, who develop an arsenal of tools. And so I really wanted to deliver that. So we have like, we call a little monthly dose where people can go read some of the new research and implications for yoga. And I'm kind of, a lot of times, because the yoga research is often not very good quality, unfortunately, I'm taking a lot of research from other modalities and applying it to yoga, which is fun. But we also do have a code if people are interested for a free month on there for your listeners. All they have to do is type in secretyogi.
Cool.
And you'll put a link on there. It's practice.yogamedicine.com.
All right. Secret Yogi. Don't forget it. No, but this is super cool, because this leads on to the next question I had, which was like, why yoga? Like, what is your definition of yoga, and why does yoga work so well over other modalities? And it integrates with other modalities, but what's your definition of yoga? I know I have my definition of yoga, but like, what's yours, and why is it this great tool over other modalities?
It's such a hard one. I feel like everyone wants to define yoga. We have this I love studying fascia too, and it's a common debate in the yoga world and the fascia world, is how do you define it? Mm-hmm. For me, it's bringing me back to my essential nature and recognizing the interconnectedness of the system, how everything influences each other, and the potential that I have too to intervene and shift and shape. It's a hard one to define. I don't know that I have a pre-created definition. There's so many aspects, and that's, I think, what's kept me. I'm a very curious person. It's kept me really curious and learning for so many years, is that there are so many different aspects that you can delve into in yoga, the physical, the mental practices, the meditation practices, the energetic, um, so much to it. Yeah. But I think ultimately it's bringing us back to ourselves and linking it all together.
Awesome. Yeah. And I agree with that. And like when I'm thinking about it, I think about it like this show. There's so many things outside of like the actual yoga asanas, like the yoga poses that can bring us back. And that's why we talk about, even though it's a yoga podcast, we talk about animal assisted therapy because we love animals. We love nature. I know you mentioned you love nature and you feel the connectiveness. And it's like, we talk about other approaches. For me, I think my meditation practice started when I was a runner. There's so many different disciplines that could kind of bring you back. Yoga is just this very proven path that is why we mainly talk about it. But that's my own unique.
I thought of a definition. Yoga is bringing us back to wholeness.
I like that.
How's that?
No, I think that's great because I always mention like breath and movement and stuff, but then I think about it now, it's like I'm thinking it's still like that physical practice, but it's more than the physical practice, the interconnectedness and exactly what you said. So that's awesome.
Intangible. And it's, our lives are so segmented and separate. We're going to work and we've got all these projects, and then we're coming home and we're being a family person or we're working from home, or, we have all these facets and of our lives and of our things we have to do. And, for me, yoga is a place where I can come and look at the whole thing. I don't have to decide today, do I want to exercise or do I want to do my yoga or do I want to relax? Like, I can find a way to really acknowledge this whole person and support that, which is really important to me. And it's one of the first things I do with patients and yoga students who are looking to shift their health and wellness, is especially people who, which this actually segues into my book, but people who come to me there was a time where I used to have a lot of patients who would come to me for weight loss and the optimal health program that I offered. And the first thing that I'm always doing, regardless of the person, is trying to shift from weight loss to feeling good. And I think whether it's weight loss or something else, I think that's so important when you come to your yoga mat, is to shed these ideas that society has told us that we need to do. We need to exercise and we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to do this. And every day you wake up and you've got 5 more, you've got another list. Do these 5 things for your nervous system, or do this, do this. And like we get overwhelmed. But we can come back to that wholeness by acknowledging and recognizing the whole and finding a way to support that. With the tools that we have.
No, yeah, and that's an awesome segue because I wanted to talk about your book and this idea of like mindful approach to being healthy, but also weight loss, because a lot of people are interested in that. And Meditate Your Weight is the name of your book, and I love that idea because that's how I'll tell you a little bit about how I think about it, and then let me see kind of your perspective on it. And my approach is like, we could only deal with so much stress. And I always use this kind of like cup analogy where it's like we have this cup and for everybody stress is different. So let's say you're stressed at work, maybe your relationship, maybe it's dairy or gluten or something that's like a food intolerance. You're not getting enough sleep. And then on top of it, it's self-induced stress, like you'd go drink alcohol. All these stress build up. And that's kind of when your cup overflows. And that's when you have the expression of outwardly symptoms. Maybe you get sick, or maybe you gain weight, or maybe you get allergies when you don't normally get allergies, or these outwardly expressions. And if we could kind of mediate that stress, and like I said, it's different for everybody. Somebody dairy is going to put them right over it, where somebody who's not sensitive to, say, dairy, just using it as an example. But this kind of goes into my approach when in terms of exercise. And it's like, all these studies, it's like, do this 30-minute HIIT workout to lose the maximum weight, or do this. And it always goes down to like these HIIT workouts or these hard, intense workouts. And my approach is like, well, if you're already stressed, why now do more self-induced stress? And like in terms of running and my running background, I remember it's like I had this idea of overtraining. And even though something could be good and like proven like this workout is good, doesn't mean it's necessarily good. And sometimes kind of doing something more like parasympathetic or doing something more like yoga to bring you down actually will help you lose weight, because it now helps you get in a more calmer state, so your body's in a healthier state to kind of de-stress, lose weight. So that's like my perspective on it. When I think of like, do CrossFit every day, do these HIIT workouts, yes, it's great and I love it, but it's like, what other stresses are you having in your life? Are you sleeping enough? Are you eating healthy? Is your emotional stress in check? All these things that, like, if you don't have that in check, you're not going to be able to deal with this kind of self-induced stress that would have otherwise been good. So,
Yeah, I think there's a couple of components, like big standout ones. The one is the nervous system, and that's a huge part of it. In my first book, I talk about that as the total load. And we've got stressors coming at us from all these different perspectives: nutrition, pharmaceuticals, air, water. Even social, and there's a lot of different forms of that as it relates to our body's ability to process and metabolize things, not just calories, but detoxify, eliminate. And so I do think that's a big part of it. So my first book was really around what I'm going to call maybe more the physical practices, the nutrition and yoga and myofascial release and home remedies that I found to be really important. It was actually a guide for my patients that I used to do workshops on and turn into a book. But then the follow-up, Meditate Your Weight, was actually a follow-up to that, because I started seeing a lot of patients who were doing all the right things. There was so much information on the internet and so many resources. A lot of people kind of have an idea of what the right things are. Maybe they need some more guidance and specifics, but people who were exercising and eating well and not responding. And so Meditate Your Weight was really looking at the mindset behind it, which I feel really strongly that I have to change my mindset from. As a society, we tend to have this mindset of like, if I want to lose weight and be healthy / be healthy, and a lot of people lump those together. If I want to be healthy or lose weight, I have to deprive myself. There is this level of kind of beating myself up and depriving myself, whether that comes in the form of like at Nike, a lot of people who would just come into me and be like, oh, I have to lose weight, so I'm running. And I'm like, well, do you like running? No, they hate it. And that they force themselves to run. It's like, well, find an exercise you enjoy. One, you'll stick with it a lot longer. And two, it'll probably actually be a little bit better for you. You'll get more endorphins, And so I think a big part of it is changing from this mindset of kind of abusing ourselves almost and torturing ourselves to how do I support health and wellness and recognize my body's capacity to heal and thrive is actually built in. Now it needs some support. And in fact, a lot of times it needs a lot of support, especially, by the time we start looking at things, sometimes it's been decades since if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes since we've really put a lot of effort into supporting that. And so, sometimes it could be a process, but I think the first thing is changing how I see it as this thing to be eliminated, that I'm not good enough as I am, that I have to change and look a certain way. And so this book is actually, I think, kind of sneaky in that sense, because hopefully it's helping people through this plan develop a different relationship with themselves, with their health, to create lasting changes. And we know this in healthcare, the lasting changes that we create are really the most impactful to our health and wellness, not the 1 week detox or the 1 month detox, which is great. It can inspire a lot of change, because a lot of times people don't know how bad they feel until they feel better. So, that's the first hump. Is like, my first book was the 30-day detox, and it was like, get people to feel good again. And then maybe they'll want to feel good again. And then the second one was, how do I create patterns and routines for a lifetime of health and wellness? And also looking at this like view of myself too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that outlook on it. And so this last question was around breaking down yoga as this prescriptive based tool. I know you didn't like to use the kind of steered away from prescriptive, but like this tool for time crunch individuals who need it most. So you mentioned it like that your book was kind of about that. Is there any particular tips to help, maybe as we were just talking about, like ingrain the process into our routine, into just being healthy? Is it just short kind of practices throughout the day? Is there any recommendations, like actionable steps somebody listening to right now can implement?
Well, I'll start off just by saying, and listeners have probably heard this before, but almost every system of the body benefits more through consistency. And, we've seen this. Meditation has some of the best research in the yoga realm. We see this a lot in meditation research, that even just 5 minutes a day can be really impactful, both right away, and then also has accruing benefits too as we practice over time. And we see this with the nervous system, the fascia, every really system of the body. To make meaningful changes, really therapeutic impacts, really requires a regular practice. And so I really believe that doesn't need to be a lot. So I really usually recommend with patients or yoga students, starting with just one thing, like a 5-minute practice, whether that's a pose or a meditation or a pranayama. And maybe that's just something you remember from a yoga practice that you've done in the past that was really helpful for you. A lot of times those memories are the most powerful thing. That's why I'm always asking in my classes people to check in and notice afterwards, because it creates this kind of catalog, this file cabinet in my memories of remembering how and when to use those potentially. So I think just carving out time for small practices. And I often have people who come in to see me who, want to do a full hour home practice on their own. And that's wonderful. And I say, that's great, but let's work toward that, because I really want to create a routine. And it doesn't mean I have to have an hour a day, especially if someone's doing other exercise practices or movement practices. I need to put it in context of who this person is and what they need. And even if they're not doing anything else, especially if they're not doing anything, again, I need to create a routine. The long-term things I can commit to are much better than that 1 hour I did once a week for 3 weeks. So don't let it overwhelm you. Find something that's easy for you to incorporate. And then, like any habit, any routine, it is helpful if you can tie it to something. So if you're working on stress reduction through mindfulness, maybe it's every morning as you brush your teeth, you notice your breath. Like, it could be something really simple. Or maybe, like, I've had patients before who have this kind of accumulation of stress as the week goes on. And then when the weekend hits, they're exhausted. And then by the time they finally recover, it's time to start the week again. So maybe it's more of a restorative practice on Thursday before it gets to the weekend, to help reset the nervous system and prepare so that you don't get to that deeply depleted state. So it kind of depends on the person and what's needed. And so if you have, like I said before, an experience of something that's been helpful, that can be a great place to start. Whether it's a pose or a meditation or breathing exercises are great, because you can do those so easily. You don't need to be in yoga gear. You don't need anything fancy for those. But again, the regularity, I think, is really important. And that's where some, the online practices can be helpful, or finding a teacher can be helpful.
Yeah. And this idea of, like, okay, this is your practice, and now taking it off the mat into the real world is this idea of this secret part of the secret yogi. And do you have your own definition? I know it's this show in terms of like the secret yogi, but if somebody's going around taking this into the real world to make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary, what's your definition? If somebody said, like, or now that kind of the show mission, it's like, what's your idea of a secret yogi, and what are they embodying really?
I love the topic. I'll start by saying, I remember a long time ago, this stuck with me. Someone described or defined a yogi as someone who leaves a place better than they found it. And I always love that definition. And I think there's a lot of different ways to look at these things. And for me, the interpretation of that wasn't that, like, I tidied up the room. And maybe I did. Maybe I tidied up the room, or maybe I brought something with me for someone, but maybe also just my energy, my capacity to listen and allow the person to feel heard, my ability to show up for someone and to be there for them. I think it can mean so many different things, but and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's, our goal is to manipulate a situation so that it's always positive, because
Yeah.
we know life isn't just always, sunshine and butterflies, but it's also to be dedicated to the tough times too with people. I think that's where the real work happens, is when, we're challenged and asked to look deeply in the darkest of hours and the most challenging of times. That's when we really get to apply our yoga, in the sense that, okay, am I stress resilient now? Great. Now I'm facing these challenges. I'm having to put everything online. I'm having to shift gears, with the challenging COVID situations. And now I think, as a yoga teacher, I sent this message out to our yoga teachers early on. It's like, now is the time. This is our practice. This is the challenge to really allow us to hone our skills as students, right? To be able to practice those stress reduction skills and these techniques that we look at to find that equanimity, to be able to appreciate our lives in the chaos, to be able to find the clarity. And so, so the other side of that, though, is I love this idea of superpowers, because I really believe that everyone has kind of like a superpower, meaning that we all have such incredible, unique strengths that we're born with, that are really like our birthright. They are the things that we are uniquely great at. And that how that shows up, I feel like, is so specific and different to each person. And, it's our life's work. And many people often call this our dharma, is to find how that, what I always say is where my strength and my passion intersects with what the world needs. What does the world need from me? And whether I'm a yoga teacher or I work in business or whatever that might be, as a human being, this is my job, is to find out how I can serve the world. And as I approach my work in that way, it's like stress just dissolves, right? Because it's not about me having to be great at what I do. It's about me offering what I do as a service, about me recognizing that I was born with these unique skills. And here I am to do my contribution to the world. And it's my job to offer that to people. And I really believe that, so many people, we all have these things just waiting to be unlocked. And for me, it's my job as a yoga teacher to help people unlock that and find that, in health and wellness in general, as well, is to be able to magnify people's superpowers by refining our health, kind of like what we talked about with working with professional athletes too.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. I love your definitions in terms of you just like a really cool perspective on it. And this like idea of like waiting to be unlocked. And this is exactly kind of like the message that I was particularly going with the show. It kind of came to be with my niece and my nephew, who are around, I think 4 and just turning 8. And I was trying to get them to do yoga. And like to get like a 4 and an 8-year-old to do yoga is hard. They don't have like the attention span. And then I started being like, oh, secret yogi, kind of like it's like a super, like they're a superhero. And this, in my mind, it's like, okay, let's make it fun, playful, but it's like this heroic self. And I started like explaining it, and then they're like, I'm a secret yogi. And like, I could actually play this. I've done it for a few episodes at the end of them. Like I got a recording of them saying like, I'm a secret yogi. And they say it all the time now. And they send me pictures of them doing like kind of like different hand mudras. And yeah, and that kind of made it fun for them. It made it engaging. They were able to embody it throughout the day, even when we were not just practicing yoga, and when I was visiting them. And I'm like, if it works for them, I mean, we're all kids at one time. It would really be something cool that people could embody. And like you said, it's like it's waiting to be unlocked, and we all have these superpowers within. And people like yourself are those who are helping them unlock their own superpowers. So it's like, it's amazing. Like, and it's awesome, the work and the resources that you put out there, because that helps us in turn unlock our own superpowers, and in turn make this world a better place as a collective whole through good and through bad times. So that's awesome. And we'll just kind of get to like the last just couple questions, which is, so I've seen your dog walking around. He or she? What's
she?
She? What's her name?
Lulu.
Lulu. So what lessons can we learn from our canine companions? I asked all the guests this that have dogs or even cats, like feline companions, but what lessons, like yogic lessons, can we learn?
That's a tough one. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is like this instant compassion and joy. There are these just unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think it's that. I think I find myself anytime I do any kind of compassion meditations or like loving kindness meditations, and sometimes during the meditations you'll think of someone or something you love, and it brings that to your smile, to your face. It brings a smile to your face. And I think dogs are that thing. They're like that instant love, that instant hit of of love and
Yeah.
compassion. And I think it for me is such a big piece of melting, the seriousness and the stress and the busyness of our lives, when we take that moment to look into the eyes of someone or something, a pet or a human that we really deeply love, and to experience that connection.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to hear that. I mean, for me, dogs are like, it's a great day to have a great day every day. It's like, it's such a cool perspective. And I'm like compiling a list of kind of everybody's answers. And it's really cool to kind of see. It really helps us get out of ourselves, taking care of another human being and knowing that it's like this,
Yeah.
yeah, this like our collectiveness is there and real. And in terms of, we'll kind of wrap this up, but I wanted to mention that I know you have the yoga medicine. Is it Siva Foundation? Siva
Yeah, the Seva
Foundation,
Foundation.
the Siva Foundation, and you're pushing to raise some money by is it December?
Yeah, so the end of the year, which I think is a nice segue, because for me, kind of like what we were talking about with animals being like that instant hit of love and compassion, and to melt and dissipate stress, for me, service work is a really big part of that. I grew up working, my mom ran a homeless shelter, and I grew up working in that and helping out, and uh, have always just seen how important it is not only to give back, but then also the capacity to do service work, and how it kind of shifts my relationship to the world and how I see my place in the world as well. It's, I think, such an important thing for a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of interesting research around health implications for people who do service work. Um, Obviously, that's not always the reason we get there, but I created the Yoga Medicine Seva Foundation as a way to give back to a culture that's given us so much. So we support. We have a couple different shelters that we support in India, that are shelters that rescue women from trafficking in India, and it's such a huge problem there. It's incredible when you start to dig through the numbers, and how organized and incredibly deeply connected and built it is in their system there. It's such a huge problem. And obviously it's in other parts of the world as well. As a yoga teacher, when you go and visit India, for me, it was overwhelming to think about myself as a woman being lost in a system and being in that situation. So as a woman who's educated and empowered, it was really important to me to give that back to women. So our program really focuses not just on shelter and food and medical, but and also yoga, which to me is an empowerment tool, but also on pairing them with meaningful vocational skills. So some go to college. We've got one girl in law school. Some will go to school to become a goldsmith, which is like one of the most highly revered professions there. We have a whole jewelry company under Her Future that we work with, Her Future Coalition, and they've got a beautiful new line now. And so it's just incredible to go and see these women, and you would never guess what they've been through. Sometimes we'll learn and hear some of their stories, and sometimes we're just there to connect. And these women, it's just mind blowing too, because I see them when I'm there and when I go and visit, and honestly, they're happier than a lot of the people that I see in the States. And to imagine what they've been through, and to watch them become empowered, and we'll go and visit the jewelry making shop where they're making jewelry, and to see this, like, just this glow in their eyes of being so proud of what they're creating and what they're doing and empowered. It's just incredible. And obviously with COVID, it's hit them disproportionately and been really challenging. We've been lucky enough to keep raising money and be able to keep our services going. But our goal was $150,000 by the end of the year, and we're already, I think, at 110. So we're very close. We've got raffles coming up and the holidays and a new jewelry line. Anyways, there's a lot of ways to get involved. If you want to volunteer or donate or buy some of our items, if you just go to Yoga Medicine Seva, it's seva.com. You can find out more. But for me, it's such an important way to put everything in perspective and a healing modality of its own.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's a super cool and meaningful message. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. And was it Yoga Medicine online or in that
so you can go to yogamedicine.com and find everything there somehow. So the online classes, there's a tab at the top. At the bottom, there's a tab for Seva. Yogamedicine.com. If you're willing to poke around in there long enough, you'll find everything. If you want the online classes, you can go straight to it at practice.yogamedicine.com. And then the code was just Secret Yogi for a free month. Cool. To get you started if you're interested and curious.
Awesome. I'm super excited. For everyone, this was not planned, but this is our first promo code. So it's like a super awesome moment on this show to be part of. So everyone listening, and thank you, Tiffany.
You're welcome.
So yeah, this was not planned at all. So I appreciate that. Everyone check out that, and it'll be in the show notes below. So you could click on those. And it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I hope everyone listening learned something new or shift the perspective of a particular thought or thoughts they were having, and consider sharing it with at least one person that needs it most in your life, a family, a friend. And also consider leaving a rating and review and signing up to our newsletter at www.secretyogisociety.com. And we're working on a new website right now, so that might be up and running by the time this launches. And absolute pleasure speaking with you. You're super cool, and it was awesome. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Austin. It was a pleasure to be here.
I'm a secret yogi and I do warrior too. I'm Landon. I'm a secret yogi. I do warrior too.
That was my niece and nephew, and they're embodying their secret yogis too through the tools of yoga, meditation, breath work, energy work, and related practices. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed it and are embodying your inner secret yogi, the best way to support this show is to leave a written review and rating wherever you're listening right now. Also, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at www.secretyogisociety.com and enjoy the rest of your day and have an extraordinary